Question 1. Market research demonstrates that reliable communication equipment is paramount for effective emergency response. A fire dispatcher notices intermittent static on their primary radio console during routine operations. The static is not constant, but occurs frequently enough to be noticeable and potentially disruptive. The dispatcher is currently handling several active incidents. What is the most appropriate immediate action to ensure both operational continuity and adherence to communication equipment standards? Option A. Immediately cease using the affected radio console and switch to a backup communication method if available, while simultaneously reporting the issue to a supervisor. Option B. Attempt to troubleshoot and fix the static issue independently to avoid disrupting current operations. Option C. Continue using the radio console for ongoing dispatches, assuming the static is minor and will likely resolve itself. Option D. Continue using the radio console for ongoing dispatches, making a note to report the static issue at the end of the shift. The correct answer is D. Continue using the radio console for ongoing dispatches, making a note to report the static issue at the end of the shift. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a fire dispatcher to balance immediate operational needs with long-term equipment integrity and compliance. The dispatcher must make a judgment call under pressure, considering the potential impact of a faulty device on emergency response times and the consequences of failing to adhere to maintenance protocols. The core challenge lies in prioritizing immediate dispatch needs against established procedures for reporting and addressing equipment malfunctions, which are critical for maintaining reliable communication during emergencies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the fundamental principles of public safety communication and regulatory compliance. By immediately reporting the intermittent radio static, the dispatcher ensures that a critical piece of communication equipment is addressed according to established protocols. This proactive reporting prevents potential communication failures during an emergency, which could have severe consequences for public safety and firefighter well-being. This action upholds the regulatory requirement for maintaining operational readiness of all communication systems, as mandated by Insert Relevant U.S. Fire Dispatcher certification regulation, e.g., NFPA 1221, Standard for the Installation, Maintenance, and Use of Emergency Services Communication Systems, or specific state/local fire code. Ethical considerations also dictate that the dispatcher has a duty to ensure the reliability of the tools they use to save lives and property. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves continuing to use the radio without reporting the issue, hoping it resolves itself. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the implicit and explicit requirements to maintain functional communication equipment. If the radio fails completely during a critical incident, the dispatcher could be held accountable for negligence, and the delay in response could lead to loss of life or property. This approach disregards the principle of proactive maintenance and risk mitigation. Another incorrect approach is to only report the issue after the shift ends. This delays the necessary maintenance and troubleshooting, increasing the risk of equipment failure during subsequent shifts. It demonstrates a lack of urgency and commitment to maintaining operational readiness, potentially violating protocols that require immediate reporting of equipment malfunctions that could impact emergency response. This approach prioritizes personal convenience over public safety. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to fix the radio oneself without proper training or authorization. This can lead to further damage to the equipment, rendering it completely inoperable and potentially voiding warranties or service agreements. It also bypasses established maintenance procedures and could violate regulations concerning the authorized repair of critical communication systems. This action demonstrates a lack of understanding of proper maintenance protocols and a disregard for the chain of command and authorized repair processes. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, compliance, and operational integrity. This involves 1. Recognizing and assessing potential risks associated with equipment malfunctions. 2. Adhering strictly to established reporting and maintenance protocols. 3. Understanding the regulatory framework governing communication equipment. 4. Communicating clearly and promptly with supervisors and maintenance personnel. 5. Prioritizing the reliability of communication systems for effective emergency response. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that the 911 emergency communication system has undergone significant transformation since its inception. Considering the regulatory framework and historical evolution within the United States, which of the following best describes the current structure and development of the 911 system? Option A. The 911 system originated as a simple, dedicated emergency number to streamline access to public safety services, evolving through the integration of technologies like Enhanced 911, E911, to provide automatic caller identification and location information, all within a framework of federal oversight and evolving state/local implementation. Option B. The 911 system is primarily a result of private telecommunications companies independently developing advanced routing and identification technologies to compete in the emergency services market. Option C. The 911 system is a fully standardized, universally implemented network across all U.S. jurisdictions with identical operational protocols and technological capabilities, unaffected by local variations. Option D. The 911 system's current structure is a purely technological advancement, focusing exclusively on the latest mobile device capabilities and neglecting its historical roots or regulatory underpinnings. The correct answer is A. The 911 system originated as a simple, dedicated emergency number to streamline access to public safety services, evolving through the integration of technologies like Enhanced 911, E911, to provide automatic caller identification and location information, all within a framework of federal oversight and evolving state/local implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a fire dispatcher to demonstrate a foundational understanding of the 911 system's historical development and its current operational structure, specifically within the context of U.S. federal regulations and guidelines governing emergency telecommunications. Misunderstanding these elements can lead to an inability to articulate the system's purpose, limitations, and evolution, which is critical for effective communication with supervisors, trainers, and ultimately, the public. The challenge lies in synthesizing historical context with present-day functionality to answer a question that probes core knowledge. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach accurately reflects the historical trajectory of the 911 system, acknowledging its origin as a simple, dedicated emergency number designed to overcome the complexity of memorizing multiple emergency service numbers. It correctly identifies the evolution from basic voice calls to the integration of advanced features like Enhanced 911 E911, which includes automatic number identification (ANI) and automatic location identification (OLI). This understanding is crucial for a fire dispatcher, as it underpins the operational procedures and technological dependencies of their role. Adherence to U.S. federal regulations, such as those overseen by the FCC, mandates this level of knowledge for effective system operation and public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the technological advancements of 911 without acknowledging its historical purpose or the regulatory framework behind its implementation is incomplete. It fails to grasp the foundational reasons for the system's creation and its subsequent evolution. This oversight can lead to a superficial understanding of the system's limitations and the importance of regulatory compliance. Another incorrect approach might overemphasize the role of private telecommunication companies in the initial development without referencing the governmental mandate and regulatory oversight that shape the system's public safety mission. While private industry plays a role in infrastructure, the 911 system is fundamentally a public service driven by federal and state regulations. Finally, an approach that suggests 911 is a universally standardized system across all jurisdictions without acknowledging the variations in implementation and the ongoing efforts to achieve greater interoperability, while still adhering to core federal mandates, is also flawed. It overlooks the practical realities of how 911 services are delivered and managed at local and state levels, which are guided by but not entirely dictated by federal frameworks. Professional reasoning. Fire dispatcher candidates should approach this question by first recalling the fundamental purpose of the 911 system as established by federal mandate for public safety. They should then trace its evolution, recognizing key milestones like the introduction of E911 and its components, ANI/OLI. Understanding the current structure involves recognizing the interplay between federal regulations, e.g., FCC guidelines, state and local oversight, and the technological infrastructure. This comprehensive view ensures that the dispatcher can articulate the system's significance, operational requirements, and the regulatory environment in which they operate, demonstrating a solid grasp of their professional responsibilities. Question 3. The performance metrics show a slight increase in average call handling time across the dispatcher team, alongside a minor dip in the accuracy of critical information logged during emergency calls. To address these trends and ensure adherence to established protocols for emergency dispatch, what is the most effective approach to quality assurance? Option A. Focus QA efforts exclusively on calls that have generated formal complaints from the public. Option B. Increase the number of calls each dispatcher is required to handle per shift to improve efficiency and reduce overall average call handling time. Option C. Conduct random, unannounced listening sessions of live calls without a defined review process to identify immediate performance issues. Option D. Implement a structured quality assurance program that systematically reviews a statistically significant sample of recorded calls using a standardized rubric, focusing on protocol adherence, information accuracy, and communication effectiveness, with regular, constructive feedback provided to dispatchers. The correct answer is D. Implement a structured quality assurance program that systematically reviews a statistically significant sample of recorded calls using a standardized rubric, focusing on protocol adherence, information accuracy, and communication effectiveness, with regular, constructive feedback provided to dispatchers. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in public safety dispatch environments, balancing the need for comprehensive quality assurance with the practical realities of limited resources and the potential for perceived over-scrutiny by dispatchers. The challenge lies in identifying a quality assurance (QA) process that is both effective in improving dispatcher performance and compliant with established protocol, without creating undue administrative burden or negatively impacting morale. The core of the challenge is to ensure that the QA process is objective, fair, and directly contributes to enhanced public safety outcomes, aligning with the fundamental responsibilities of a fire dispatcher. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and data-driven review of recorded calls, focusing on adherence to established protocols, accuracy of information gathered, and effective communication techniques. This aligns with the core principles of quality assurance in emergency services, which aim to identify areas for improvement, reinforce best practices, and ensure compliance with regulatory frameworks governing emergency dispatch. By using a standardized rubric and providing constructive feedback, this method promotes continuous learning and professional development among dispatchers, directly contributing to improved response times and better outcomes for callers. This approach is best professional practice because it is objective, measurable, and directly linked to the critical functions of a fire dispatcher, ensuring that all interactions meet the high standards required for public safety. It also supports the regulatory requirement for maintaining accurate records and ensuring competent service delivery. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves focusing solely on the number of calls handled per shift, without regard for the quality of the interaction. This fails to address the critical aspects of dispatcher performance, such as accurate information gathering, proper protocol adherence, and effective communication, which are paramount for ensuring appropriate and timely emergency response. This approach is ethically and regulatorily deficient as it prioritizes quantity over quality, potentially leading to missed critical details or miscommunication that could have severe consequences for public safety. Another incorrect approach is to conduct random, unsystematic reviews of recorded calls without a defined methodology or set of criteria. This lacks objectivity and fairness, making it difficult to identify consistent performance issues or provide targeted feedback. Such an approach is unlikely to lead to meaningful improvements and may be perceived as arbitrary by dispatchers, undermining the credibility of the QA process. It also fails to meet the implicit regulatory expectation of a structured and accountable QA system. A third incorrect approach is to only review calls where a complaint has been received. While complaint-driven reviews are important, they do not provide a comprehensive picture of overall performance. This reactive approach misses opportunities to identify and correct systemic issues or reinforce positive practices across all interactions. It is a failure of proactive quality management and does not fulfill the responsibility to ensure consistent, high-quality service delivery across the board, which is a fundamental expectation for any certified dispatcher. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should approach quality assurance with a mindset of continuous improvement and accountability. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements and departmental protocols for call handling and documentation. 2. Developing and implementing a standardized QA process that includes objective criteria for evaluating dispatcher performance. 3. Utilizing recorded calls for both formative feedback to help dispatchers improve and summative evaluation to assess overall performance. 4. Ensuring that feedback is constructive, timely, and actionable, focusing on specific behaviors and protocols. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the QA process to ensure its effectiveness and relevance. This systematic and proactive approach ensures that the QA process serves its intended purpose of enhancing public safety and supporting the professional development of dispatchers. Question 4. The assessment process reveals a fire dispatcher, a candidate's response to a scenario where a caller reports a fire, but provides a vague address, stating only near the old mill on Elm Street. The candidate is presented with mapping software displaying multiple Elm Street designations across different districts and several abandoned structures that could be interpreted as the old mill. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates the required proficiency in using mapping and GIS for call location and resource deployment in this situation? Option A. Rely solely on the initial cell tower location provided by the system, without further verification, and dispatch resources to that general vicinity. Option B. Cross-reference the caller's cell tower triangulation data with known landmarks and street layouts within the GIS to identify the most probable old mill location on any Elm Street, and then query for the closest available fire apparatus. Option C. Request the caller to provide a precise street number and confirm the exact spelling of Elm Street before initiating any mapping or dispatch procedures, even if it means a significant delay in response. Option D. Immediately dispatch the closest available fire apparatus to the old mill on the most common Elm Street in the primary response district, assuming the caller will provide further clarification en route. The correct answer is B. Cross-reference the caller's cell tower triangulation data with known landmarks and street layouts within the GIS to identify the most probable old mill location on any Elm Street, and then query for the closest available fire apparatus. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for fire dispatchers, rapidly and accurately identifying a caller's location and deploying resources effectively, especially when initial information is vague or incomplete. The professional challenge lies in the critical need for speed and precision, as any delay or error in location identification can have life or death consequences. The dispatcher must balance the urgency of the situation with the need to gather sufficient information to ensure the correct response. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic and multifaceted verification process using available GIS tools. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory guidelines for emergency dispatch, which mandate the use of all available technology to confirm location data. Specifically, referencing the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA standards, such as NFPA 1221, standard for the installation, maintenance, and use of public emergency service telecommunications equipment. Dispatchers are expected to utilize automatic location identification (OLI) and geographic information systems (GIS) to their fullest extent. The correct approach demonstrates adherence to these standards by cross-referencing multiple data points, including cell tower triangulation, GPS data, and caller-provided landmarks, to establish the most probable and accurate location. This methodical verification minimizes the risk of misdirection and ensures resources are dispatched to the correct incident, thereby upholding the duty of care and public safety mandate. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the initial, potentially unreliable ALI data without further verification is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses established protocols designed to ensure accuracy and could lead to dispatching resources to the wrong address, delaying critical aid to the actual incident. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the highest standards of public safety. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying deployment until absolute certainty is achieved, is also professionally unacceptable. While accuracy is paramount, emergency response requires a balance between speed and certainty. Unnecessary delays can be as detrimental as dispatching to the wrong location, as they can prevent life-saving interventions. This approach fails to recognize the dynamic nature of emergency response and the need for timely action based on the best available information. A third incorrect approach, which involves guessing the location based on limited information and proceeding with deployment, represents a severe dereliction of duty. This is a direct violation of protocols that require verification and demonstrates a reckless disregard for the potential consequences of misdirected emergency services. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a tiered approach to location verification. First, utilize all automated systems, (ALI, GPS). If these are ambiguous or unavailable, engage the caller in a structured questioning process to elicit descriptive landmarks or cross streets. Simultaneously, leverage GIS tools to analyze the surrounding area for potential matches and to identify the most likely incident location based on the caller's description and available data. The dispatcher must continuously assess the reliability of the information and be prepared to adjust their deployment strategy as new data becomes available, always prioritizing the safety and well-being of the public. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates that response times for certain types of fire incident are not consistently meeting established benchmarks. To address this, the Fire Dispatcher I certification syllabus emphasizes process optimization within emergency dispatch. Considering the critical nature of fire dispatch, which of the following approaches best exemplifies process optimization for information gathering and dispatch initiation? Option A. Relying on assumptions about the incident based on common fire types in the area and dispatching units based on these assumptions, with minimal direct questioning of the caller. Option B. Prioritizing the emotional support of the caller, spending significant time reassuring them and gathering extensive background information before initiating any dispatch, even if critical details are still missing. Option C. Immediately dispatching the closest available fire units based on the initial report of a fire, and then attempting to gather further details from the caller while units are en route. Option D. Implementing a standardized, protocol-driven questioning sequence designed to efficiently gather all essential information, location, nature of incident, caller details, etc., before initiating dispatch, ensuring a comprehensive initial report. The correct answer is C. Immediately dispatching the closest available fire units based on the initial report of a fire, and then attempting to gather further details from the caller while units are en route. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the fire dispatcher I to balance the immediate need for accurate information with the potential for caller distress and the critical nature of emergency response. The dispatcher must quickly assess the situation, extract vital details, and initiate appropriate actions while maintaining composure and adhering to established protocols. The pressure of time, the uncertainty of the situation, and the responsibility for public safety demand a highly structured and optimized approach to information gathering and dispatch. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the systematic collection of critical data points essential for effective fire response, as mandated by Fire Dispatcher I certification standards and operational guidelines. This method ensures that all necessary information is obtained efficiently, minimizing delays and reducing the risk of miscommunication or omission. It aligns with the principle of process optimization by streamlining the interaction to achieve the most effective outcome in the shortest possible time, thereby enhancing public safety and resource allocation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate dispatch without confirming critical details fails to meet regulatory requirements for thorough information gathering. This could lead to misdirected resources, delayed response to the actual emergency, or dispatching the wrong type or number of units, all of which are significant ethical and operational failures. Another incorrect approach that involves extensive questioning beyond essential information gathering protocols wastes valuable time and can further agitate a distressed caller, potentially hindering the collection of crucial data and delaying the emergency response. which is a failure in process optimization and adherence to emergency dispatch best practices. An approach that relies on assumptions rather than direct confirmation of details introduces a high risk of error, violating the dispatcher's duty to provide accurate and reliable information to responding units, a core ethical obligation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with active listening and immediate threat assessment, followed by a structured, protocol-driven questioning process. This framework emphasizes obtaining the most critical information first: location, nature of the emergency, caller information, before proceeding to secondary details. It involves continuous evaluation of the caller's state and the evolving situation, allowing for flexibility within the established protocols to ensure both efficiency and accuracy. The goal is to optimize the dispatch process by gathering the right information, in the right order, as quickly as possible, to facilitate the most effective emergency response. Question 6. Assessment of the most effective technique for a fire dispatcher to rapidly determine the severity of an incoming emergency call and assign the appropriate level of response, considering the potential for multiple simultaneous calls. Option A. Rely primarily on the caller's emotional state and level of distress to gauge the urgency of the situation. Option B. Attempt to gather extensive background details and resolve non-emergency aspects of the call before dispatching any emergency units. Option C. Systematically gather critical information using established protocols to classify incident urgency and dispatch resources accordingly. Option D. Prioritize calls based on the order in which they are received, regardless of the reported incident. The correct answer is C. Systematically gather critical information using established protocols to classify incident urgency and dispatch resources accordingly. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for fire dispatchers, managing multiple incoming calls with varying levels of urgency. The professional challenge lies in the dispatcher's responsibility to accurately and rapidly assess the severity of each situation, allocate limited resources effectively, and ensure the most critical incidents receive immediate attention. Failure to do so can have life-threatening consequences for the public and responders. The dispatcher must balance the need for speed with the necessity of gathering sufficient information to make informed decisions, all while maintaining composure under pressure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, protocol-driven method of call screening and prioritization. This method emphasizes gathering key information quickly, utilizing established protocols for classifying incident severity, e.g., life-threatening, property-threatening, informational, and assigning appropriate response levels based on these classifications. This aligns with best professional practices mandated by fire service dispatch standards, which prioritize patient care and public safety by ensuring that the most urgent calls are handled first. This systematic approach minimizes subjective bias and ensures consistent, defensible decision-making, thereby upholding the ethical duty of care. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize calls based solely on the order in which they are received. This fails to acknowledge that a later arriving call might represent a far more immediate threat to life or property. This approach is a direct violation of dispatch protocols designed for emergency response and demonstrates a failure to exercise professional judgment in assessing urgency, potentially leading to delayed response to critical incidents. Another incorrect approach is to rely heavily on the caller's emotional state or perceived level of panic to determine priority. While a caller's distress is a factor, it should not be the sole determinant. Over-reliance on emotion can lead to misclassification, where a less urgent but highly emotional call might be prioritized over a calmer but more critical situation. This deviates from objective, protocol-based assessment and can result in inefficient resource allocation, violating the principle of equitable and effective emergency response. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to resolve non-emergency issues or gather extensive background information before dispatching resources for a potentially serious incident. While some information gathering is necessary, delaying the dispatch of emergency units for non-critical details is a significant failure. This approach prioritizes information completeness over immediate life-saving action, which is contrary to the fundamental purpose of emergency dispatch and the regulatory framework governing it. Professional reasoning. Fire dispatchers should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate threat assessment. This involves asking critical, concise questions to determine the nature of the emergency, the number of people involved, and the immediate danger. This information is then cross-referenced with established dispatch protocols that define different levels of emergency and the corresponding response priorities. If multiple calls are received simultaneously, the dispatcher must quickly categorize each based on these protocols, dispatching resources to the highest priority incident first, while simultaneously gathering information and initiating the dispatch process for subsequent calls as resources allow. This structured approach ensures that critical incidents are addressed promptly and efficiently, adhering to regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Question 7. Comparative studies suggest that the reliability of telecommunications infrastructure is paramount for effective emergency response. In a scenario where a critical component of the primary radio dispatch system experiences intermittent failure, impacting the ability to communicate with field units, what is the most appropriate course of action for a fire dispatcher? Strictly adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks and established best practices for emergency communications. Option A. Inform field units to rely on personal cell phones for communication until a technician can arrive and diagnose the problem, without initiating any formal reporting or system checks. Option B. Attempt to troubleshoot and fix the radio system by directly accessing and modifying its configuration settings based on a quick online search for similar issues, hoping to restore functionality quickly. Option C. Implement a direct, unauthorized modification to the radio system's firmware, based on a suggestion from a field unit, to attempt a rapid, albeit undocumented, restoration of service. Option D. Immediately initiate a documented, authorized temporary bypass or failover to a secondary communication system as per agency SOPs, while simultaneously reporting the primary system failure to the designated technical support and supervisors for immediate investigation and repair. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a documented, authorized temporary bypass or failover to a secondary communication system as per agency SOPs, while simultaneously reporting the primary system failure to the designated technical support and supervisors for immediate investigation and repair. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a fire dispatcher to balance immediate operational needs with the long-term integrity and compliance of critical telecommunications infrastructure. The dispatcher must understand that, while a temporary workaround might seem efficient in the moment, it could have significant regulatory and operational repercussions if not handled according to established protocols and governing laws. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to rushed decisions that bypass necessary checks and balances. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework for emergency telecommunications, specifically focusing on the guidelines set forth by the relevant U.S. federal and state authorities governing public safety answering points, SAP, and their equipment. This approach ensures that any deviation from standard operating procedures, especially concerning critical infrastructure like radio systems, is documented, authorized, and implemented in a way that maintains compliance with FCC regulations, NIMS guidelines, and any state-specific mandates regarding interoperability and reliability. It upholds the ethical responsibility to provide reliable emergency services by ensuring that the infrastructure supporting those services is managed responsibly and in accordance with legal requirements. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing a direct, unauthorized modification to the radio system's configuration without proper authorization or documentation would represent a significant regulatory failure. This bypasses established change management protocols, which are often mandated by FCC rules concerning radio frequency usage and equipment certification. It also poses an ethical failure by potentially compromising the system's integrity, leading to unreliable communications, which directly impacts public safety. Furthermore, such an action could violate internal agency policies and potentially lead to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on anecdotal advice from a vendor without verifying it against official documentation or consulting with authorized technical personnel, is also professionally unacceptable. It fails to meet the regulatory requirement for proper technical oversight and validation of system changes. It introduces a risk of introducing non-compliant configurations or vulnerabilities into the system, which could have severe consequences for emergency response and violate the dispatcher's duty of care. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the issue until a formal technician can arrive, even if the problem is impacting immediate dispatch capabilities, could also be problematic. While caution is important, a complete inaction might violate service-level agreements or internal protocols that require prompt reporting and initial troubleshooting of critical system failures. This could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in maintaining operational readiness, potentially impacting response times and violating the spirit of ensuring reliable emergency communications. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core problem and its immediate impact on emergency communications. Next, they must consult their agency's standard operating procedures, SOP, and any relevant regulatory guidelines, e.g., FCC rules, NIMS, to understand the prescribed course of action for such issues. This involves assessing whether the problem requires immediate technical intervention, a documented workaround, or escalation. If a workaround is considered, it must be evaluated for compliance with all applicable regulations and agency policies, including authorization and documentation requirements. The decision-making process should always prioritize public safety, regulatory compliance, and system integrity, even under pressure. When in doubt, escalation to supervisors or technical support is the safest and most compliant course of action. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates two simultaneous incoming alerts: a confirmed structure fire with visible flames at a residential address, and a report of smoke emanating from a commercial building several blocks away, with the caller unsure if it is a fire. Which of the following actions best represents the immediate, prioritized response for a fire dispatcher? Option A. Delay dispatch to the confirmed structure fire until more information is gathered about the smoke report to ensure all potential incidents are fully understood. Option B. Dispatch fire suppression units to both locations simultaneously without further verification to ensure no incident is missed. Option C. Dispatch fire suppression units to the confirmed structure fire immediately, while simultaneously gathering more information on the smoke report to determine its priority. Option D. Dispatch fire suppression units to the commercial building to investigate the smoke report, as it is a commercial property and may involve more people. Correct answer is C. Dispatch fire suppression units to the confirmed structure fire immediately, while simultaneously gathering more information on the smoke report to determine its priority. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in fire dispatch where multiple, potentially conflicting, pieces of information arrive simultaneously. The professional challenge lies in rapidly and accurately prioritizing incoming data to ensure the most critical information drives the initial response, thereby maximizing the effectiveness of emergency services and public safety. The dispatcher must discern the most immediate threat and allocate resources accordingly, a task requiring keen judgment under pressure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the confirmed, active fire incident over a potential, unconfirmed hazard. This aligns with fundamental fire service principles of responding to immediate, life-threatening situations first. Regulations governing emergency dispatch emphasize the need for rapid assessment and dispatch of appropriate resources to confirmed incidents. Ethical considerations also dictate that a known, active fire poses a greater and more immediate risk to life and property than a report of smoke that has not yet been verified as a fire. This approach ensures that the primary mission of fire suppression and rescue is addressed without delay. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that prioritizes the unconfirmed smoke report over the confirmed structure fire fails to adhere to the core mandate of emergency response. This is a regulatory failure as it deviates from established protocols for handling confirmed incidents, and an ethical failure as it potentially delays critical response to an active emergency. An approach that attempts to dispatch resources to both incidents simultaneously without a clear prioritization strategy risks diluting resources and potentially compromising the response to the confirmed fire. This is a procedural failure and an ethical lapse, as it could lead to inadequate response to the most severe threat. An approach that delays dispatch to the confirmed fire to gather more information about the smoke report is a critical failure. This inaction directly contravenes the urgency required for confirmed fire incidents and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the immediate risks involved. Professional reasoning. In situations with multiple incoming reports, a fire dispatcher should employ a structured decision-making process. First, immediately acknowledge and log all incoming information. Second, rapidly assess the nature and severity of each report. Confirmed incidents, especially those involving active fire or immediate threats to life, take precedence. Third, dispatch appropriate resources to the highest priority incident without delay. Fourth, continue to gather information and manage secondary incidents or requests while the primary response is underway. This systematic approach ensures that critical decisions are made based on verified information and established protocols, maximizing the safety and effectiveness of emergency operations. Question 9. To address the challenge of a caller reporting a complex, rapidly evolving emergency with multiple potential hazards, what is the most appropriate role and responsibility for a fire dispatcher, within the Public Safety Answering Point (SAP), to ensure an effective and compliant response? Option A. Attempt to provide advanced medical advice and scene management instructions to the caller, drawing on personal knowledge and assumptions about the situation. Option B. Cease communication with the caller due to the complexity of the situation and focus solely on internal SAP administrative tasks until the situation is clarified by external sources. Option C. Prioritize personal opinions and assumptions about the caller's credibility and the nature of the emergency over the information they are providing, and delay dispatch until personal verification is possible. Option D. Immediately dispatch appropriate emergency resources based on the initial information, provide critical pre-arrival instructions to the caller, and maintain clear communication with responding units, while continuously gathering and relaying updated information. The correct answer is D. Immediately dispatch appropriate emergency resources based on the initial information, provide critical pre-arrival instructions to the caller, and maintain clear communication with responding units, while continuously gathering and relaying updated information. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the dispatcher to balance immediate life-saving actions with the strict adherence to established protocols and the defined roles within a public safety answering point (SAP). The pressure of a rapidly evolving, high-stakes situation can lead to deviations from standard operating procedures, potentially compromising the integrity of the response or the accuracy of information gathered. The dispatcher must maintain composure and make critical decisions under duress, ensuring that all actions align with the SAP operational framework and legal mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the dispatcher's primary responsibility to gather critical information, dispatch appropriate resources, and provide pre-arrival instructions while maintaining clear communication channels. This aligns directly with the core functions of a SAP as defined by regulatory frameworks governing emergency services. The dispatcher acts as the crucial link between the public and emergency responders, ensuring that the right help is sent efficiently and that the caller receives vital guidance. This approach upholds the ethical duty to serve and protect the public by facilitating a coordinated and effective emergency response. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the dispatcher attempting to directly manage the scene or provide advanced medical advice beyond their training and scope of practice. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it oversteps the dispatcher's defined role, potentially delaying the dispatch of appropriate emergency personnel or providing incorrect information that could harm the caller. SAP operations are designed to be a hub for information and resource allocation, not scene management. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize personal opinions or assumptions over established protocols and the information provided by the caller. This is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. SAP operations are governed by strict protocols to ensure consistency, fairness, and effectiveness. Deviating based on personal bias or assumption undermines the reliability of the emergency response system and can lead to misallocation of resources or inadequate assistance. A third incorrect approach might be to become overwhelmed and cease communication or fail to dispatch resources promptly. This represents a critical failure in fulfilling the dispatcher's core responsibility and a violation of the duty of care owed to the public. Regulatory frameworks mandate prompt and accurate response to emergency calls. Such inaction would have severe legal and ethical ramifications. Professional reasoning. Professionals in a SAP must employ a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established protocols, accurate information gathering, and efficient resource dispatch. This involves active listening, clear and concise communication, and a thorough understanding of their role within the broader emergency response system. When faced with challenging situations, the dispatcher should rely on their training, the established protocols, and the information at hand, escalating to supervisors or specialized units when necessary, rather than deviating from their defined responsibilities. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a 911 call reports smoke showing from a commercial building. The caller states it appears to be an older brick building with a wooden roof structure. Based on this information and your understanding of building construction types and their impact on fire behavior, what is the most appropriate initial dispatch consideration for this incident? Option A. Delaying the dispatch of additional resources until a visual confirmation of the fire's extent and construction type is obtained by the first arriving unit. Option B. Prioritizing the dispatch of units based solely on the commercial occupancy type, without specific consideration for the reported construction materials. Option C. Dispatching a minimal initial response, assuming the brick exterior provides significant fire resistance and the wooden roof is a minor concern. Option D. Dispatching a standard initial attack assignment for a commercial structure fire, recognizing the potential for rapid fire spread through the wooden roof and the challenges of fire containment in Type Roman III ordinary construction. The correct answer is D. Dispatching a standard initial attack assignment for a commercial structure fire, recognizing the potential for rapid fire spread through the wooden roof and the challenges of fire containment in Type Roman III ordinary construction. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the dispatcher to quickly assess a situation based on limited information and apply knowledge of building construction to predict fire behavior and inform initial response. Misinterpreting construction types can lead to under-resourcing or misdirecting resources, potentially endangering responders and civilians. The dispatcher must balance the need for immediate action with the importance of accurate situational awareness. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing the dispatch of appropriate resources based on the most probable fire behavior associated with the identified construction type. This aligns with the fundamental principles of fire service operations, which emphasize proactive risk assessment and resource allocation. By recognizing that a Type Roman III ordinary construction building presents specific challenges like potential for rapid fire spread through concealed spaces and structural compromise, the dispatcher ensures that responding units are equipped to handle these hazards. This proactive approach is implicitly supported by standard operating procedures and training that emphasize understanding building construction's role in fire dynamics. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the occupancy type without considering construction is a regulatory and ethical failure. While occupancy is a factor, it does not dictate the fire's behavior as directly as construction. For example, a mercantile occupancy in a Type V wood frame building will behave differently than the same occupancy in a Type I fire-assistive building. This oversight can lead to inadequate initial resource requests, violating the duty to ensure responder safety and effective incident mitigation. Another incorrect approach is to dispatch minimal resources based on a perceived low risk, without considering the potential for rapid fire growth inherent in certain construction types. This represents a failure to adhere to established risk management protocols and could be considered negligence if it leads to an insufficient response. The ethical failure lies in not prioritizing the safety of both the public and the responding firefighters by underestimating the potential hazard. Finally, an approach that delays dispatch while attempting to gather more detailed information about the specific building's construction, when initial information suggests a potentially hazardous type, is also a failure. While information gathering is important, the primary regulatory and ethical obligation is to initiate a response that is commensurate with the perceived threat. Delaying a potentially life-saving response based on a desire for perfect information is unacceptable. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate threat assessment based on available information. This involves categorizing the incident based on key factors, including occupancy, location, and, crucially, building construction type. Once a preliminary assessment is made, the dispatcher should consult established protocols and their knowledge base to determine the appropriate initial response. This framework emphasizes a layered approach to risk management, where initial decisions are based on the most probable outcomes, with mechanisms for adjusting the response as more information becomes available. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates that a caller reports their neighbor is acting strange and won't come to the door. The dispatcher needs to determine the appropriate level of emergency response. Which of the following actions best reflects a risk assessment approach for this scenario? Option A. Dispatch a single police officer to investigate the welfare check, as the situation sounds like a potential mental health crisis rather than a fire or medical emergency. Option B. Advise the caller to try knocking on the door again and wait for a response before considering any further action. Option C. Immediately dispatch a full fire engine and ambulance crew to the residence, as acting strange could indicate a medical emergency or a dangerous situation. Option D. Ask the caller for more specific details about the neighbor's behavior, the duration of the behavior, and if there are any signs of distress or danger before initiating a dispatch. The correct answer is C. Immediately dispatch a full fire engine and ambulance crew to the residence, as acting strange could indicate a medical emergency or a dangerous situation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because the dispatcher must quickly assess the severity of a potentially life-threatening situation based on limited and possibly incomplete information. The dispatcher's judgment directly impacts response times and resource allocation, which can be critical in determining patient outcomes. The emotional state of the caller, the ambiguity of the reported symptoms, and the need to gather essential details without delaying the dispatch of appropriate resources all contribute to the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate risk assessment and the dispatch of the most appropriate resource based on the initial information. This aligns with the core principle of emergency dispatch, to ensure the fastest and most effective response to a potentially critical incident. By asking targeted questions to determine the nature and severity of the emergency, the dispatcher can initiate the dispatch process while continuing to gather information. This proactive approach minimizes delays in getting help to the scene, which is paramount in saving lives and mitigating harm. This aligns with the fundamental duty of care expected of a certified fire dispatcher, emphasizing public safety and efficient emergency response. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying dispatch until all possible information is gathered. This fails to acknowledge the critical nature of emergency response, where seconds can matter. It violates the principle of prioritizing life safety and could lead to a delayed response, potentially exacerbating the emergency. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the urgency required in call taking and processing for fire and emergency medical services. Another incorrect approach is to dispatch the highest level of response without a proper risk assessment. While erring on the side of caution is sometimes necessary, indiscriminate dispatch of all resources can lead to inefficient use of valuable emergency personnel and equipment, potentially leaving other areas vulnerable. It also fails to leverage the dispatcher's role in accurately triaging calls to ensure the right resources are sent to the right incident, which is a key component of effective emergency management. This approach bypasses the critical step of informed decision-making based on the caller's report. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the caller's self-diagnosis without further probing. Callers may be panicked, misinformed, or unable to accurately describe their situation. The dispatcher's role is to interpret the information provided and assess the underlying risk, not to accept the caller's conclusion at face value. This failure to critically evaluate the information can lead to misallocation of resources and a delayed or inappropriate response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured approach to call taking and processing that emphasizes rapid risk assessment. This involves active listening, asking clear and concise clarifying questions, and utilizing established protocols to determine the nature and severity of the emergency. The decision-making process should be guided by the principle of dispatch early, gather more, meaning that the dispatch process should be initiated as soon as sufficient information is available to determine the appropriate initial response, while continuing to gather further details to refine the response if necessary. This iterative process ensures that help is on its way while the dispatcher continues to manage the call and provide pre-arrival instructions. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal a recurring pattern where dispatchers struggle to effectively manage callers experiencing significant emotional distress during emergencies, impacting the timely and accurate gathering of critical information. Which of the following techniques represents the most effective approach for a fire dispatcher to manage such a caller while ensuring essential details are obtained? Option A. Mirroring the caller's emotional intensity to build rapport and demonstrate understanding of their distress before attempting to gather information. Option B. Employing a calm, empathetic tone, actively listening to the caller's concerns, and then gently guiding them to provide specific, essential information in simple, manageable steps, while reassuring them that help is on the way. Option C. Immediately demanding precise details about the emergency, interrupting the caller's expressions of distress to ensure all necessary data points are captured without delay. Option D. Making definitive promises about the exact arrival time of emergency services and the specific outcomes of the incident to alleviate the caller's anxiety. The correct answer is B. Employing a calm, empathetic tone, actively listening to the caller's concerns, and then gently guiding them to provide specific, essential information in simple, manageable steps, while reassuring them that help is on the way. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for fire dispatchers. Managing a caller experiencing extreme emotional distress during a critical emergency. The dispatcher must balance the immediate need for accurate information to dispatch appropriate resources with the caller's emotional state, which can impede communication. The challenge lies in maintaining control of the call, gathering essential details, and providing reassurance without becoming overwhelmed or making promises that cannot be kept. Careful judgment is required to assess the caller's capacity to provide information and to adapt communication techniques accordingly. The correct approach prioritizes de-escalation and information gathering simultaneously. By using a calm, reassuring tone, active listening, and empathetic statements, the dispatcher can begin to manage the caller's distress. Breaking down questions into simple, manageable parts and focusing on critical details like location and nature of the emergency are paramount. This method aligns with best professional practices for emergency dispatch, emphasizing the need to obtain vital information efficiently while acknowledging and addressing the caller's emotional state. This approach is ethically sound as it aims to provide the best possible assistance under difficult circumstances, respecting the caller's humanity while fulfilling the dispatcher's duty. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on demanding information without acknowledging the caller's distress would be professionally unacceptable. This could exacerbate the caller's panic, leading to further communication breakdown and potentially delaying the dispatch of critical aid. Ethically, it fails to demonstrate empathy and respect for the individual's suffering. Another incorrect approach that involves making definitive promises about outcomes or response times is also problematic. This can create unrealistic expectations and lead to dissatisfaction or further distress if those promises cannot be met. It is a failure to adhere to professional honesty and to manage expectations appropriately. A third incorrect approach that involves mirroring the caller's emotional intensity would be highly detrimental. This would escalate the situation, making it impossible to gather necessary information and potentially leading to a chaotic and unproductive call. It demonstrates a lack of professional control and emotional regulation, which are core competencies for a dispatcher. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with immediate threat assessment and situational awareness. This involves recognizing the caller's emotional state and its potential impact on communication. The next step is to employ de-escalation techniques, focusing on a calm and reassuring demeanor. Simultaneously, the dispatcher must identify and prioritize critical information needed for dispatch. This often involves a structured questioning approach, adapting the pace and complexity of questions to the caller's ability to respond. Continuous assessment of the caller's state and the effectiveness of communication strategies is crucial, allowing for adjustments as needed. Question 13. Consider a scenario where a 911 call is received via TTY/TDD. The dispatcher can see the incoming text, but the text is fragmented and difficult to understand, with repeated phrases and what appears to be a request for medical assistance. The caller is not responding to standard TTY/TDD prompts for clarification. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the dispatcher? Option A. Rely solely on the fragmented text to dispatch emergency services to the general area indicated by the repeated phrases, without further clarification. Option B. Continue to engage the caller via TTY/TDD, patiently repeating prompts and asking for specific details about the emergency and location, while simultaneously initiating a silent dispatch to the caller's last known address if available, and the nature of the emergency suggests a high probability of a medical issue. Option C. Advise the caller via TTY/TDD that communication is too difficult and suggest they try calling back using a voice line if possible. Option D. Immediately attempt to call the number from which the TTY/TDD call originated to verbally confirm the emergency and gather details. The correct answer is B. Continue to engage the caller via TTY/TDD, patiently repeating prompts and asking for specific details about the emergency and location, while simultaneously initiating a silent dispatch to the caller's last known address if available, and the nature of the emergency suggests a high probability of a medical issue. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the dispatcher to adapt standard communication protocols to accommodate a caller with a disability, ensuring effective and timely information exchange. The dispatcher must balance the urgency of the emergency with the need for clear, patient communication, while adhering to established procedures for TTY/TDD and text-to-911 services. The core challenge lies in accurately interpreting the caller's needs and relaying critical information without miscommunication, which could have severe consequences. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes direct, clear communication using the established TTY/TDD protocol, which is designed for individuals with hearing or speech impairments. This method ensures that the dispatcher receives information directly from the caller, minimizing the risk of misinterpretation. It aligns with the principle of providing equal access to emergency services for all individuals, as mandated by regulations such as the Americans with Disabilities Act (ADA) in the United States, which requires Public Safety Answering Points (SAP) to have functional TTY/TDD capabilities and to train personnel on their use. Furthermore, it demonstrates a commitment to patient-centered care and operational efficiency by utilizing the most appropriate and reliable communication method for the caller's specific needs. An incorrect approach that involves asking the caller to use a relay service for a voice call is professionally unacceptable. This fails to recognize the caller's primary mode of communication and imposes an unnecessary step that could delay the emergency response. It also violates the spirit of accessibility regulations by not directly engaging with the caller's preferred method of communication. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to interpret text messages without confirming the caller's identity and the nature of the emergency through a direct TTY/TDD connection, introduces a significant risk of misinterpretation and incomplete information gathering. Text-to-911, while a valuable tool, is often a secondary or supplementary method, and direct TTY/TDD communication is generally preferred for individuals who are proficient in its use for emergency calls. Finally, an approach that involves ending the TTY/TDD session prematurely due to perceived difficulty in understanding is a critical failure. This abandons the caller and fails to fulfill the dispatcher's duty to provide emergency assistance, directly contravening ethical obligations and regulatory requirements for handling all emergency calls. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, identify the communication method being used by the caller, TTY/TDD, text-to-911, or voice. Second, confirm the caller's identity and the nature of the emergency using the most direct and reliable method available. Third, if TTY/TDD is used, follow established protocols for that system, ensuring clear and concise communication. Fourth, if text-to-911 is the only option or a supplementary one, confirm receipt and understanding of messages, and be prepared to transition to voice if possible or necessary. Fifth, always maintain patience and professionalism, recognizing that communication may take longer and require repetition. Adherence to established protocols and a commitment to accessibility are paramount. Question 14. The investigation demonstrates that a dispatcher received a report of smoke coming from a residential structure. The caller also mentioned that the smoke appeared to be getting thicker and darker, and that they could hear crackling sounds. Based on this information, which of the following dispatch considerations best reflects an understanding of basic fire behavior principles and their impact on response strategy? Option A. Dispatching a standard initial attack assignment for a residential structure fire, but also immediately requesting an additional engine company and a ladder truck due to the indicators of rapid fire growth and potential for involvement. Option B. Dispatching only a single engine company to investigate, as the initial report does not explicitly state fire is visible. Option C. Immediately dispatching a standard initial attack assignment for a residential structure fire, while noting the caller's description for potential future adjustments. Option D. Delaying the dispatch of any units until the caller can provide a more precise description of the smoke's color and density. The correct answer is C. Immediately dispatching a standard initial attack assignment for a residential structure fire, while noting the caller's description for potential future adjustments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the dispatcher must interpret rapidly evolving information about a fire incident and translate it into actionable dispatch decisions. The challenge lies in the dispatcher's responsibility to accurately assess the potential fire behavior based on limited initial reports and to prioritize resources effectively, all while adhering to established protocols and understanding the fundamental principles of fire spread. Misinterpreting fire behavior can lead to delayed or inappropriate resource deployment, potentially endangering lives and property. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a dispatcher actively considering the basic principles of fire behavior, such as the stage of fire development and the factors influencing its spread: fuel, oxygen, heat, and chemical reaction. This proactive mental model allows the dispatcher to anticipate how the fire might evolve and to dispatch resources that are commensurate with the potential threat. For instance, recognizing signs of a fire in the growth stage might prompt the dispatch of additional units beyond the initial response, anticipating a more significant incident. This aligns with the core competency of a fire dispatcher I, which includes understanding incident dynamics to ensure appropriate and timely response. Adherence to these principles is implicitly required by the Fire Dispatcher I certification framework, which emphasizes preparedness and effective incident management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on the initial caller's description without considering the underlying fire behavior principles. This failure to analyze the potential for fire spread, such as overlooking the significance of a report indicating rapid flame spread or heavy smoke, represents a regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of proactive risk assessment, which is a fundamental expectation for a certified dispatcher. This could lead to undersourcing the incident, violating the duty to provide adequate emergency services. Another incorrect approach is to dispatch resources based on a predetermined standard response for any structure fire, regardless of the reported conditions or the potential for rapid fire growth. This rigid adherence to protocol, without considering the dynamic nature of fire behavior, is a failure to apply professional judgment, can result in either oversupplying a minor incident or, more critically, undersupplying a rapidly developing fire, thereby failing to meet the standard of care expected of a certified dispatcher and potentially jeopardizing public safety. A third incorrect approach is to delay dispatch or request further information beyond what is immediately necessary to initiate a response, based on an assumption that the fire is minor. This is a critical failure in understanding fire behavior, as even small fires can escalate quickly. The regulatory expectation is for a prompt and appropriate response to all reported fires, with the dispatcher's role being to facilitate that response based on the best available information and an understanding of fire dynamics. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that integrates incoming information with their foundational knowledge of fire behavior. This involves actively listening to caller description, identifying keywords that suggest specific fire behavior, e.g., flames shooting out the window, thick black smoke, rapidly spreading, and mentally mapping these observations to the stages of fire development and factors influencing spread. The dispatcher should then use this analysis to determine the appropriate initial resource allocation and to anticipate potential escalation, informing subsequent dispatch decisions. This proactive, analytical approach ensures that resources are deployed effectively and efficiently to mitigate the incident and protect life and property. Question 15. Upon reviewing the initial dispatch call regarding a structure fire, the dispatcher hears the reporting party state, "The flames are coming out the windows and we need help fast." The dispatcher then transmits to responding units. Engine 1, Ladder 2, respond to 123 Main Street, reported structure fire, heavy smoke and fire showing from multiple windows. Respond with lights and sirens. After a few minutes, the incident commander reports, "All clear, fire contained to the room of origin, no extension." Which of the following actions by the dispatcher best reflects the proper use of firefighting terminology and communication protocols in this scenario? Option A. The dispatcher asks the incident commander for a more detailed description of the fire's intensity using terms like flashover or backdraft to ensure complete understanding. Option B. The dispatcher informs responding units that the fire is under control based on the incident commander's initial report of containment. Option C. The dispatcher acknowledges the all clear and updates the status to closed in the system, having accurately relayed the initial emergency and the final resolution. Option D. The dispatcher immediately transmits a situation resolved message to all units, assuming the incident commander's assessment is complete and final. The correct answer is C. The dispatcher acknowledges the all clear and updates the status to closed in the system, having accurately relayed the initial emergency and the final resolution. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in emergency dispatch where the clarity and accuracy of communication are paramount, especially when dealing with potentially life-threatening situations. Misinterpreting or misusing firefighting terminology can lead to delayed or inappropriate resource deployment, potentially endangering both the public and responding personnel. The dispatcher's role requires a precise understanding of these terms to effectively relay critical information to the incident commander and other units. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates a thorough understanding of standard firefighting terminology and its application in dispatch. By accurately identifying and using terms like Code 3 for emergency response and All Clear for a confirmed situation, the dispatcher ensures that all responding units understand the urgency and status of the incident. This adherence to established protocols and terminology, as outlined in typical firefighter certification guidelines, is crucial for maintaining operational efficiency and safety. It reflects best professional practice by prioritizing clear, unambiguous communication that aligns with industry standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach might involve using vague or non-standard terminology. For example, describing a response as urgent instead of Code 3 could lead to ambiguity regarding the required response speed and siren/light usage, potentially causing delays or unnecessary risks. This failure to use precise, recognized terminology violates the implicit expectation of clear communication within the fire service and could be seen as a breach of professional duty to ensure accurate information transfer. Another incorrect approach could be the premature use of terms indicating resolution, such as situation under control, before confirmation. This could lead to the premature withdrawal of resources or a false sense of security, potentially re-exposing personnel to danger if the situation is not truly resolved. This demonstrates a lack of adherence to established incident management principles and a failure to exercise due diligence in confirming critical information, which is a significant ethical and professional lapse. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes accuracy, clarity, and adherence to established protocols. This involves actively listening to the caller or reporting party, cross-referencing information with known terminology and procedures, and confirming critical details before relaying them. A robust understanding of firefighting acronyms and terms, as taught in firefighter certification, is foundational. When in doubt, seeking clarification from a supervisor or experienced colleague is a sign of professional maturity and a commitment to safety. The goal is always to provide the most accurate and actionable information to ensure the best possible outcome for the incident. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a caller is reporting a fire but is audibly distressed and speaking rapidly. Which questioning strategy is most effective in gathering essential information for immediate dispatch? Option A. Focus on obtaining a detailed description of the fire's intensity and spread before inquiring about the location. Option B. Begin with open-ended questions to allow the caller to describe the situation, Then use targeted, clarifying questions to confirm critical details such as location and the nature of the emergency. Option C. Ask leading questions like, is it a kitchen fire? Or, are there any children inside? To quickly categorize the emergency. Option D. Immediately ask for the exact street address and the number of people trapped without allowing the caller to elaborate on the initial report. The correct answer is B. Begin with open-ended questions to allow the caller to describe the situation. Then use targeted, clarifying questions to confirm critical details such as location and the nature of the emergency. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because the caller's distress and potential for providing incomplete or inaccurate information due to panic can significantly impede the dispatcher's ability to gather critical details. The dispatcher must balance the need for speed in dispatching resources with the necessity of obtaining a clear, actionable picture of the emergency. Failure to elicit precise information can lead to delayed or misdirected responses, potentially exacerbating the situation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes open-ended questions that encourage the caller to provide information in their own words, followed by targeted, clarifying questions. This strategy respects the caller's emotional state while systematically extracting essential data points like location, nature of the emergency, and number of individuals involved. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that the dispatcher is not leading the caller or making assumptions, thereby maximizing the accuracy and completeness of the information received. This method is ethically sound as it prioritizes the well-being of the caller and the community by ensuring efficient and effective resource deployment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately demanding specific, closed-ended answers without first allowing the caller to describe the situation. This can alienate a distressed caller, causing them to shut down or provide fragmented information. Ethically, this fails to acknowledge the caller's emotional state and can be perceived as insensitive, potentially hindering the information-gathering process. Another incorrect approach is to ask leading questions that suggest a particular type of emergency. This can introduce bias into the information received, leading the dispatcher to dispatch inappropriate resources or overlook critical details not fitting the assumed scenario. This is a regulatory failure as it compromises the accuracy of the information used for dispatch decisions, potentially violating protocols designed to ensure appropriate resource allocation. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on gathering one piece of information at a time, without attempting to build a comprehensive understanding of the situation. This can lead to a piecemeal and inefficient information gathering process, delaying the dispatch of crucial resources. This is a professional failure as it demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and an inability to multitask effectively under pressure, which is a core competency for a fire dispatcher. Professional reasoning. Fire dispatchers must employ a structured yet flexible questioning technique. This involves starting with broad, open-ended questions to allow the caller to describe the situation, then transitioning to specific, clarifying questions to fill in any gaps. Active listening, empathy, and the ability to remain calm under pressure are paramount. Dispatchers should be trained to recognize cues of distress and adapt their questioning accordingly, always prioritizing the acquisition of actionable intelligence for emergency responders. Question 17. Examination of the data shows that the primary radio console is intermittently dropping audio during transmissions, and the secondary telephone line is also experiencing static. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for a fire dispatcher to ensure operational readiness? Option A. Immediately attempt to contact the on-duty supervisor to report the intermittent audio issues with the radio console and the static on the telephone line. Option B. Systematically test the radio console's audio output and microphone, then verify the clarity and functionality of the secondary telephone line, documenting all findings before escalating to a supervisor. Option C. Focus exclusively on troubleshooting the radio console, as it is the primary means of dispatch, and address the telephone line issue only if the radio cannot be restored. Option D. Conduct a thorough visual inspection of all visible wiring and connections for both the radio console and the telephone system, looking for any obvious physical damage. The correct answer is B. Systematically test the radio console's audio output and microphone, then verify the clarity and functionality of the secondary telephone line, documenting all findings before escalating to a supervisor. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common yet critical challenge in emergency dispatch. A dispatcher must quickly and accurately assess the operational status of essential communication equipment under pressure, as any malfunction can directly impede the timely and effective dispatch of emergency services. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate action with the requirement for thorough, systematic checks to ensure reliability. Failure to do so can have severe consequences for public safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a systematic, multifaceted check of the primary communication system, including the radio console and associated hardware, followed by a verification of secondary systems like the telephone. This aligns with best practices for ensuring redundant communication capabilities, a core principle in emergency dispatch protocols. It demonstrates a proactive stance on maintenance and operational readiness, which is implicitly or explicitly required by most emergency service regulations and operational guidelines that mandate reliable communication channels. This methodical approach ensures that the dispatcher can confirm the integrity of the primary means of communication before relying on it, and then verify backup systems, minimizing the risk of a complete communication failure during an emergency. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the radio console without verifying the telephone system. This is a regulatory failure because it neglects the requirement for redundant communication pathways. Regulations typically mandate that dispatch centers have multiple, independent means of communication to ensure continuity of service, even if one system fails. Relying on a single system, even if it appears functional, is a breach of this principle. Another incorrect approach involves only performing a visual inspection of the equipment. This is an operational and potentially regulatory failure because it does not confirm the actual functionality of the equipment. A visual check can miss internal faults or software glitches that would render the equipment inoperable during a critical event. Best practices and likely regulatory frameworks require functional testing, not just cosmetic inspection, to ensure readiness. A third incorrect approach is to immediately attempt to contact a supervisor without first performing any diagnostic checks. This represents a failure in professional judgment and potentially a procedural violation. While escalation is important, it should be based on an initial assessment of the problem. Bypassing basic troubleshooting steps delays the resolution and may lead to unnecessary disruption or misallocation of supervisory resources. It demonstrates a lack of initiative in addressing immediate operational issues. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach equipment issues by first following established diagnostic protocols. This typically involves a tiered approach. Confirm the primary system's functionality, then verify secondary systems, and finally, escalate if the issue cannot be resolved through basic troubleshooting. This systematic process ensures that all communication avenues are assessed for reliability, adheres to regulatory requirements for redundancy, and demonstrates professional competence in managing critical infrastructure. Question 18. Performance analysis shows that during a multi-unit response to a structure fire, the dispatcher receives a radio transmission from the first arriving engine reporting heavy smoke showing from the front of the structure, and simultaneously hears the incident commander Ike on the radio requesting a size-up report from the first arriving unit. Shortly after, a secondary transmission from the same engine reports possible entrapment reported by a bystander. How should the dispatcher prioritize and relay this information to the IC? Option A. Relay all incoming radio traffic in the exact order it was received without prioritization to ensure the IC has all available information. Option B. Immediately relay the report of possible entrapment to the IC, followed by the IC's request for a size-up report, and then the initial report of heavy smoke. Option C. Relay the report of heavy smoke, then the IC's request for a size-up report, and then relay the report of possible entrapment, assuming the IC will ask for it. Option D. Relay the IC's request for a size-up report first, then the report of heavy smoke, and finally the report of possible entrapment once the IC has completed their initial size-up. The correct answer is B. Immediately relay the report of possible entrapment to the IC, followed by the IC's request for a size-up report, and then the initial report of heavy smoke. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in fireground operations. the need to rapidly assess and communicate critical information under pressure to ensure effective Incident Command System (ICS) implementation. The dispatcher's role is pivotal in establishing situational awareness for the incident commander (IC) and other responding units. The professional challenge lies in filtering incoming information, prioritizing its transmission, and ensuring clarity and accuracy to avoid confusion or delays that could impact firefighter safety and operational effectiveness. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between routine updates and critical tactical information. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the transmission of information directly relevant to the incident commander's immediate decision-making and the safety of personnel. This aligns with the core principles of ICS, which emphasize clear communication channels and the flow of essential information to the command structure. By relaying the report of a possible entrapment and the IC's request for a size-up, the dispatcher is facilitating the IC's ability to establish command, assess the situation, and assign resources appropriately. This proactive communication ensures the IC has the necessary situational awareness to develop an effective incident action plan. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on relaying all incoming radio traffic without prioritization fails to recognize the dispatcher's role in information management within the ICS framework. This can overwhelm the IC with non-critical data, hindering their ability to focus on strategic decisions and potentially delaying critical actions. It represents a failure to understand the communication protocols and information flow essential for effective incident management. Another incorrect approach that delays relaying the report of a possible entrapment until after the IC's initial size-up is a significant ethical and professional failure. The potential for victim entrapment is a high-priority, life safety issue that must be communicated immediately to the IC. Delaying this information could directly jeopardize the safety of potential victims and the effectiveness of rescue operations. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of incident prioritization and the critical nature of life safety information. Finally, an approach that attempts to interpret or add information not explicitly provided by the responding units before relaying it to the IC is also professionally unacceptable. Dispatchers must act as conduits for accurate information, not as interpreters or analysts of the scene. Speculation or the addition of unconfirmed details can lead to misinformation and flawed decision-making by the IC, potentially compromising the entire operation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a constant assessment of incoming information against the established priorities of incident management, life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. Dispatchers must be trained to recognize keywords and phrases that indicate critical information, e.g., entrapment, fire showing, collapse. They must then prioritize the relay of this information to the IC, ensuring it is delivered clearly and concisely, allowing the IC to maintain command and control effectively. Question 19. Market research demonstrates that effective quality assurance processes are critical for emergency dispatch operations. A fire dispatcher is handling a critical emergency call when they notice an alert on their console indicating a potential issue with the call recording system. The caller is providing vital information about a rapidly evolving situation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the dispatcher to ensure both immediate emergency response and regulatory compliance regarding call recording? Option A. Continue to gather all critical information from the caller without acknowledging or reporting the recording system alert, assuming it will resolve itself. Option B. Acknowledge the recording system alert. Follow established protocol to report the issue to the appropriate technical support or supervisor while continuing to manage the emergency call and document the alert and any actions taken. Option C. Immediately cease gathering information from the caller to troubleshoot the recording system, as a complete recording is paramount. Option D. Manually attempt to restart the recording system without consulting any technical documentation or supervisor, believing this will resolve the issue quickly. The correct answer is C. Immediately cease gathering information from the caller to troubleshoot the recording system, as a complete recording is paramount. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a dispatcher to balance the immediate need for information with the strict legal and procedural requirements surrounding call recording and quality assurance. The dispatcher must understand that while gathering critical details is paramount, The integrity and admissibility of that information can be compromised if established protocols are not followed. The potential for legal ramifications, internal disciplinary action, and compromised evidence in a critical incident necessitates careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing adherence to established protocols for call recording and quality assurance. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate accurate and verifiable record-keeping for emergency services. Specifically, in the context of a fire dispatcher certification, this would involve understanding and applying guidelines that ensure the call recording system is functioning correctly, that the recording is initiated as per policy, and that any subsequent quality assurance review is conducted in accordance with established procedures. This ensures the reliability of the recorded evidence, which is crucial for post-incident analysis, training, and potential legal proceedings. It upholds the ethical obligation to maintain accurate and complete records. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to disregard the call recording system status, focusing solely on gathering information from the caller. This fails to comply with regulations that mandate the proper functioning and utilization of call recording systems. The absence of a verified recording could render crucial information inadmissible in investigations or legal challenges, violating the principle of accurate record keeping. Another incorrect approach would be to manually attempt to fix a malfunctioning recording system during an active emergency call, without following established troubleshooting or escalation procedures. This bypasses quality assurance protocols designed to ensure the integrity of recordings and could lead to further system damage or an incomplete recording. It also deviates from the dispatcher's primary role of managing the emergency response. A third incorrect approach would be to assume the recording is functioning without any verification, even if the system indicates a potential issue. This neglects the quality assurance aspect of call handling, which requires proactive monitoring and verification of recording integrity. Failure to verify could lead to a critical gap in evidence if the recording is indeed not operational, violating the spirit and letter of regulations concerning the reliability of emergency communications records. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that first assesses the immediate emergency needs. Simultaneously, they must be acutely aware of and adhere to established protocols for call recording and quality assurance. If a system issue is detected, the dispatcher should follow predefined escalation procedures to report the malfunction and seek assistance from technical support or a supervisor, while continuing to manage the emergency call to the best of their ability. This layered approach ensures both immediate life safety and long-term procedural compliance. Question 20. Analysis of a situation where a caller, clearly distressed but not in immediate life-threatening danger, requests to speak directly with a specific fire captain at a particular station to report a minor, ongoing neighborhood nuisance that is not a fire or medical emergency. The dispatcher has confirmed the caller's situation does not meet the criteria for an emergency dispatch. Option A. Advise the caller to go to the fire station in person to speak with the captain, as direct phone transfers for non-emergency matters are not permitted. Option B. Attempt to gather detailed information about the neighborhood nuisance and offer advice on how the caller might resolve it themselves before deciding whether to transfer the call. Option C. Immediately transfer the call to the requested fire station, explaining to the captain that a resident wishes to speak with them about a neighborhood issue. Option D. Inform the caller that direct transfer to specific personnel is not possible for non-emergency inquiries, and provide the non-emergency contact number for the fire department or relevant agency, while also documenting the call and the information provided. Correct answer is D. Inform the caller that direct transfer to specific personnel is not possible for non-emergency inquiries, and provide the non-emergency contact number for the fire department or relevant agency, while also documenting the call and the information provided. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the ethical dilemma of prioritizing immediate perceived need over established protocol, potentially compromising the integrity of emergency response systems. The dispatcher must balance empathy with adherence to regulatory frameworks governing call handling and resource allocation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it strictly adheres to the fire dispatcher certification guidelines for call routing and transfer. This ensures that all emergency calls are logged, assessed by trained personnel, and dispatched according to established protocols, thereby maximizing the efficiency and effectiveness of emergency services. It upholds the principle of equitable resource distribution and prevents potential misallocation or delay of critical aid. An incorrect approach that involves directly transferring a non-emergency call to a specific fire station without proper logging and assessment violates the core principles of emergency dispatch. This bypasses the established triage system, potentially diverting resources from genuine emergencies and failing to document the call, which is a regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to handle the non-emergency call personally and providing advice outside the scope of emergency dispatch, is also a failure. This can lead to misinformation, liability issues, and a delay in addressing actual emergencies that may be occurring simultaneously. Furthermore, it deviates from the defined role and responsibilities of a fire dispatcher. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, accurately identify the nature of the call, emergency vs. non-emergency. Second, consult established protocols for handling non-emergency inquiries, which typically involve providing information on appropriate non-emergency contacts or services. Third, if the call is determined to be an emergency, follow the prescribed procedures for dispatching appropriate resources. Finally, maintain clear and concise documentation of all interactions. This framework ensures compliance with regulations, ethical conduct, and effective public service.